All right, to give you a better idea of Australia, we're going to look at some of the animals that can be found there. Now, we're not going to look at all of them, but we are going to look at quite a few. Let's start with this guy. This is called a Bandicoot. Kind of looks like a rat, but if you look, the mouth looks a little different, the head shape a little different. Here we've got a bilby. Kind of looks like I don't know, if a mouse and a kangaroo somehow had a baby. Kind of looks like that. This one, see these blue rings right here? This is called a blue ring octopus. I realize it's not the most creative name. It is very poisonous, even though it's not very big. And there's no antidote to the toxin, the poison that this thing has. But it is cool looking. The box jellyfish, these can also be deadly if you get stung by a bunch of these. The brown snake, if this guy bites you and you don't get the shot, the cure, quickly, there's a pretty good chance that you will die. In Australia, they've got freshwater crocodiles that you'll find in lakes and rivers. And then they've got the saltwater crocodiles that you'll find in the saltwater lakes or where the freshwater meets the ocean. They have a type of wild dog. It's not quite a wolf, but it's not really a dog either. It's called a dingo. These were not originally in Australia. They were brought by one of the different groups of people that came in later before white people showed up. This guy can be a little hard to see at first. He kind of blends in with the grass. This is an emu. You can see the eggs there, very dark in color. Emu, very shaggy right here. You can see the way his legs bend. Blends right into the grass pretty well. These guys, they're bats, but they're called flying foxes. A little bit later, you'll see a video of people hunting these bats with using the boomerang. I think that's on day 3 lesson. This is obviously a spider. This tarantula here, look at the size of the fangs on the front of him here. He can bite through shoes and fingernails with those teeth. So if you ever see one of these guys, don't try and stomp on them. You can find seals in Australia. You can find the great white shark. This is a real photo of someone who was in a surfing contest. Didn't know there was a shark there. You can find a cute little koala bear. Oh, look at him. This is obviously not a real photo. They have an animal there called a possum. And this possum looks kind of cute. Kind of looks like a hamster. We have possums in Minnesota. They look like giant mutant rats. So I think Australia got the better deal there. They have these big lizards called monitors. They've got about 20 different species of these things. They can swallow eggs whole, bite off one of your fingers, a lot of them. They're pretty strong. They've got this thing called a numbat. It's, I guess think of it kind of like a fox and a chipmunk mixed together. This is not a kangaroo. It's often called a Rufus Wallaby. It's like a little version of a kangaroo, kind of. Little fat kangaroo, kind of, but it's not a kangaroo. The famous platypus. He's got the beak of a duck, but he's got 2 nostril holes in his beak. He's got claws with like a poison thumb. He's got kind of a beaver's tail. He lays eggs. He's got fur. He just doesn't really fit into any kind of category. This is a quokka. Think of him as kind of a big rat. There's a few different kinds of kangaroos. This is a red kangaroo. And yes, you can find them laying down like this. They have a type of spider that's poisonous called a black widow. On their butts is a red hourglass. But they're not really very poisonous. I mean, this idea that if one bites you, you're going to die. It's not necessarily true. I mean, if you're a little child or very old and they bite you, you could die. There was a full-grown man who fell into a nest of these and had like 20 or 30 bites. He survived. I think he spent like 6 months in the hospital and nearly died many times, but he survived. So, not quite as deadly as some of the other things we've looked at already. They've got scorpions. They're not usually painful, although if you're allergic to the venom, that's a different story. Although if they spike you in the leg, it might swell up and hurt a lot for a long time. This guy right here, kind of like a wild cat, sort of. Spotted quoll. Looks like he's hunting something right now. Kind of cool looking. Almost looks like a cat and a giant rat had a baby, I guess. This guy's hard to see. If you look really closely, this thing right here, this is a fish. It's called a stonefish because it looks like a stone. So you can see it's got eyes. They are the most venomous fish in the world. If you step on one of these things thinking it's a rock, you're going to be in trouble. Sugar gliders, kind of like cute little hamsters, only they're very loud and they like to bite. This is called a taipan. It's an extremely venomous snake. This cute little guy right here is called a Tasmanian Devil. They're kind of like little miniature bears, I guess. Tiny, 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 itty bitty little bears. They eat dead animals, so he didn't necessarily kill this animal. This is called a tiger snake. If you look at the fangs, you can probably figure out why. Nearly half the people who get bit, if they don't get treated, die. This is not a kangaroo. This is called a wallaroo. It's like another little miniature version of a kangaroo. You might have noticed by now that a lot of these animals have very similar body designs. Part of this has to do with the terrain, the land of Australia, and with the fact that Australia was so isolated from everywhere else that animals developed very differently here. This is called a yabby. We'd call it a crayfish. So there are some animals from Australia.